Thanks for coming. This is the infrastructures panel for VM Underground opening acts for VMworld 2015. Thanks for coming. We've got a pretty high-powered panel of people here that are a little bit shy, so you might need to help coax them out of their shell. And they sometimes have opinions, so we'll see what kind of insights we can eke from them. If we maybe want to start from James on this side, go down and just introduce yourself and which company you're with, maybe your Twitter handle, those kinds of things.
All right. I'm James Bowling. I'm a principal for GDT out of Dallas, Texas for the data center practice. vCentral on Twitter. Yeah, that's me.
My name is Eric Wright. I'm at Disco Posse on Twitter, which is a really odd one, and I'm the technology evangelist for VMturbo.
Hi, I'm Stu. That's STU on Twitter. Thanks, Jay. It's my second year coming to this event. Those that don't know me, I'm a researcher and analyst with Wikibon, and we also do a video program called theCUBE. Stop by Moscone North Lobby. We'll be doing lots of interviews this week, and yeah, that's me.
Okay. My name is Leah Schoeb. I work for Intel. I manage a reference architecture and performance group, and my Twitter handle is vLeahSchoeb.
My name is Jay Metz. I am an R&D engineer for advanced storage at Cisco. Believe it or not, Cisco still does storage. And
Wow.
I know, advanced type too.
Oh, man.
Talk. We have to talk. My Twitter handle is Dr. J Metz.
All right. Rick Scherer. I'm a principal and field CTO for EMC. And my Twitter handle is Rick_Scherer.
Great. Well, let's jump right into things. And one thing I want to make sure is very clear is this is an open panel, so that means that your questions are probably more valid than our questions. So if there's ever a time when you want to ask a question or you want to introduce into a topic, raise your hand, and I've got a mic for you to use here. But let's just get things started, get things warmed up, and we'll just kind of go through the panel, maybe start from Rick's side, from right to left. Yep.
One question.
Yep.
Whiptail. Fuck Whiptail, by the way.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Well, fortunately, we don't have any
It had anything to do with that. Wrong division.
Apparently transcripts of the speech are available by sending $2 to Damien's address.
And drink. Colorful commentary from Damian Carlson.
Social.
Oops, we didn't have the mic on. Thanks for kicking it off. Thanks for breaking the ice. But maybe, Rick, if we want to start with you, and just tell us, since it's an infrastructure panel, and that's about the most generic thing you could possibly describe in IT, what to you in IT infrastructure today is relevant, and maybe just kind of go all the way from Rick down. Everyone take a quick crack at this, 30 to 45 seconds. What's relevant today?
What's up with Whiptail?
Excellent.
Dude, do you really want to know?
Well, last year it was the all Rawlinson panel and all Calgary panel, so maybe this is my turn.
So relevance in infrastructure.
Yes. So we have a lot to talk about. There's network, there's security, there's hyperconvergence, there's everything.
Before you sat down, you thought you actually knew something, right?
I've chosen the wrong profession. That's to broaden that entire thing into a 45-second response, man. That's rough, but this whole push for cloud, right, public cloud, it's going to happen, but I think some people think it's going to happen faster than others. But I think long term it's going to happen, but there's still always going to be on-prem, right? And
Premises.
My premises is my premises.
Can we get a cone of silence for Howard?
Yeah.
Silence, please.
Yes.
Wait your turn.
But it's always going to be in terms of infrastructure, Moore's law is going to always push that, right? So it's bigger, better, faster, less latency, across the board on everything, right?
Yep.
If you want to more focus the question, I'd be more than happy to. But again, for broad, where's IT going? It's a really hard.
This is just the warm-up
question, right?
So, working from a storage perspective, storage in the infrastructure realm is kind of like a forest and trees. The forest is not just the trees. So you can't just isolate the trees and expect the entire ecosystem to be, moving along happily. But we're changing the trees when it comes to storage, and we're changing them in a big way. So what we're seeing, at least from a storage perspective, back towards the virtualized environments, is that as we move towards ridiculously fast storage, the new types of non-volatile memory and the new types of ways of addressing non-volatile memory and the new types of ways of networking non-volatile memory that are only 3 times slower than DRAM. And the way that we're going to have to rewrite our applications and rethink the way that we do virtualization in our entire end-to-end infrastructure is going to change drastically over the next 2 to 3 years, I think.
All right.
Is that 45 seconds?
No, you took some of my time. That's not good.
You went over your time.
The PhD is never below his time.
So I've been at Intel for 6 months, but the time that I've been there, I have seen infrastructure drastically change in 2 areas, in public cloud and also in the enterprise. So there's this transformation that's going on both sides, and how they architect storage to support that in future technologies I see are very different. But what I do see is slowly on the enterprise side is they're adopting some of the new technologies that a lot of the CSPs, the first tier CSPs, I've seen them slowly adopt more of their types of architecture. And I think over the next 10 years, I still think we will see some on-prem, but on-premises. Okay, thank you. On-premises. But I think we're going to see more and more of that model where folks don't want that overhead with their whole infrastructure. Am I done? Am I good? Okay, go ahead.
Nice. Stu, you should be an ace at this. Under a minute.
Under a minute?
Come on,
Give us a good one.
So the problem is too much infrastructure is what's holding us back. When you buy something, when you build something, how is it helping your business move forward? When we build a data center, you're stuck in that data center for 25 to 35 years. When you build your own application, you're going to probably be with that for a decade or more easily. I mean, most applications, I thought I heard the average age of an application is at least 15 years old. So one of the things we've been preaching for many years now is you need to get rid of your undifferentiated heavy lifting. What is the stuff that you are doing that is special to you? And are you doing that because it's cool and interesting and I like playing with stuff? Or am I doing it because it can help move my company forward? I'm an infrastructure guy. The whole reason we have infrastructure is to be able to serve the business and serve the applications. I remember when I worked for a real big company, IT was usually the group that told you no. Or it was the group that went slow. And to quote, it's Alan, who was originally from Nicira, he's now over at Illumio, he said, we need to get those no's and those slows to get to go. So I'm not saying that everything needs to move really fast, but we need to think about when you do something, can somebody else help me do it better? Can I get rid of my own data center? Can I help just take something off the shelf that is going to work better? So, we can debate the NVMe stuff and the various, geek knobs on pieces, but
NVMe is great.
NVMe is awesome,
Wonderful.
and she's going to make sure that Intel keeps that Moore's law clicking.
Oh, yeah.
So, we really need to just, figure out, IT matters greatly, but make sure you're serving the business and helping your company differentiate in the right places.
Yep. Great.
All right.
Hit the turbo button.
I'll start with the classic meme. Abstract all the things. That's what it is. Abstracting your infrastructure is going to be what's next. The underlying infrastructure we've learned has a long tail of legacy. Legacy is called legacy for a reason. It's been around for a long time. It will continue to be around for a long time. What we're going to get better at is abstracting the ability to access, control, manage, consume that, so that we can let it live longer and we move further up the stack. That's the real...
So real quick question there then. What are just 1 or 2 things you think aren't abstracted today?
The whole data center, cross-platforms. And it's the challenge of we have this thing of like there's too many people who are trying to do something that's collectively going to solve it for all of us. So I'm going to start a new project. So now there's one more person trying to collectively solve it for all of us. The fact that storage is always going to be separated. Sorry for hyperconverged folks. That storage in its current form is always going to be separated from compute, or not always, but for a long time. And for us to be able to bring that closer together, it's moving the abstraction of how we consume it to be further up the application stack. And obviously, automation and orchestration are key. People are getting better at creating immutable infrastructure, to be able to leverage tools, to let it do things for you, to take the human aspect out of it, because that means that you've got some assurance that it's actually going to survive, react the way you expect it to, and continue to go when you're not able to manage it. And then policy. Without policy, all this stuff is pointless, because if you can't have policy that defines how you create that, manage it, consume it, then there's always going to be pieces that fall outside of that, and it's going to limit things.
Like that.
Yeah. Well, kind of to echo off of that, I think right now we have an issue where people don't truly understand where it's going, right? That's kind of why we talk about this stuff. So we talk about the automation and orchestration pieces of an infrastructure. Once we get that down pat, we're able to focus more on futures rather than having to deal with the now. Right now, a lot of people, a lot of engineers and companies are fighting fires, and that's not really what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be worrying about the future of the business and where we need to go. And I think to kind of go off of the cloud thing, I see that, I see that picking up pretty quick. I mean, the biggest problem is people don't understand it. They want to jump to it, but they don't have their policies and their processes in place, and that's the biggest problem. You see a lot of failed cloud initiatives, and it's because of the fact they didn't take the proper steps ahead of time to realize what their processes are, get them down to where we know that to get from point A to point B, we have 50 steps, and we don't address those 50 steps because we don't have it written down. It's just in someone's head.
Well, not only that, I mean, if we launch off into responding to some of this, I think James is spot on.
Yep.
But I think that's actually a symptom of a larger disease. And I think that one of the biggest problems with changes in infrastructure is that there is no criterion for failure. There's no way that people always sit there and they start saying, well, I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to go to the cloud, or I'm going to make a hybrid cloud, and I'm going to do things off premises or on premises. But at the same time, no one actually sits down and says, what do I have to do to say I'm not going to do it anymore because it isn't working.
Right.
It's this gung ho, let's go do this because I read it in an in-flight magazine, and I'm going to make it work no matter what. Things are going to fail. I'm going to put mission critical applications on some sort of abstract concept. It's going to fail miserably, but they're going to continue to do it because they never actually said, this is my point of no return.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And the tier one CSPs, that's their special sauce. So they're not necessarily going to be writing reference architecture documents for everyone to read because that's how they make their money.
Yep.
The problem of money doesn't fix money problems. We think that the cloud doesn't fix your infrastructure stinking. Like you poorly manage your infrastructure, putting it into the cloud means you're going to poorly manage your cloud, right? We're continuing the same practices just on new products.
Yeah, well, I mean,
exactly.
we failed with the whole outsourcing thing. If you thought you could get your mess for less, if you put your mess somewhere else, it's still your mess.
That's right.
You just it takes longer to get to it.
Yeah.
So
Come on, haven't you fixed those networking issues yet?
I fix every networking issue I come across.
Excellent.
So we'll get into some fun automation questions a little later. Before we do, though, and in general questions, if you guys have a question, again, raise your hand. We want to make this as interactive as possible. Stu's got a question?
No, I'm just telling them, come on, raise your hand. It's
Got a
not that
question?
hard. Come on.
All right.
Excellent. Good man.
Great. Here you go.
Damien's buying a drink for everybody that asks a question. So
Looking forward to the drink. So we seem to have kind of skirted around an overall issue here. We talked about how the cloud is where things are trending. We talked about how...
I can't hear you. You have to bring it closer.
We talked about how we have the different silos. You have your storage, your networking. The silos are starting to tear down. Where do you see enterprise roles in the next 5 years? I mean, to be a good architect nowadays, you have to be able to accomplish abstraction. You have to be able to tie it all together. And just where do you see things in that area as far as a skill set?
I'm going to take the position of I don't feel like silos are being torn down. I think people have forgotten that in order for us to have these fluid infrastructures and be able to do what we have to do, those silos have to come down. But they're still there. I mean, regardless, someone may say, yeah, those silos aren't there anymore because software defined everything. Well, that's not true. You still have to go talk to your storage guy, and you still have to be able to talk the same language. You know, silos and being torn down is more about communication barriers. It's not really technology. Really, it's communication. You know, it's being able to look at your network guy and talk a common language.
Well, that's exactly his question, though. I mean, it's the layer 8 communication skill set that needs to be bolstered.
Yeah, but
I think silos are being torn down, but only for the methods of deploying workloads, right, and synergies between those teams. So there's always going to be a need for SMEs, right? There's still going to be storage SMEs, network SMEs, etc. What automation orchestration is helping with, though, is the provisioning of resources and mundane tasks, right? Using an SME to create and mask a LUN is a waste of resource and a waste of time, right? They should be focused on more important things that help the business. So with all of this change, I think silos and jobs aren't going away, but new jobs are being created, right? So this whole cloud architect role is important, and I think the next elevated step for the guys that jumped at VMware head first, the next step up is that cloud architect role, and all that really means is that you understand how everything works together, right? And then the next step beyond that is automation orchestration, so some form of programming type skill, right? And again, understanding of how things all tie together. Then as we talk about cloud native apps now in Platform 3, that introduces a whole new realms of skill set.
And if in case we need a legend for what Platform 3 is, raise your hand and say, what's Platform 3? Anybody know what Platform 3 is? Anybody not know what Platform 3 is? Okay. So explain Platform 3 maybe?
So IDC term, talking about the next wave of IT, basically, right? So
it's typically applications that you would consider born in the cloud, if you will.
Right. So Platform 1 was the legacy mainframe style application, users and access, right, type points. Platform 2 is the client server type era, and then Platform 3 is the new cloud native. So everything that you'll hear this week at VMworld from Kit Colbert and all the announcements around cloud native apps, that's Platform 3.
Yeah, at least
so can I just I've heard the term automation a bunch, and we've been trying to automate for decades now, and I think we need to be careful that thinking that automation is a panacea, because we said if it's kind of outsourcing is my mess for less. If I have a process that's not great and I just try to automate it, that doesn't necessarily make it better.
Right, and that was the point I was getting at, is people don't fully understand their processes, right? And if that process is flawed, you're automating a flawed process, so what good does that do you? It does nothing. It causes more heartache, right?
Break it fast. I think so. Full automation is definitely this idea that we think that we're going to get there, and then if people fear that robots are going to replace us, which is not true. I've got a Roomba; it's great. I know it's vacuuming my apartment as we speak. But I don't think we're going to finish. We will continuously move further up, the stack or whatever it is. That stuff that we call automation today is now a wizard that used to do. When you first deployed a VM in vSphere 2.5, it was a lot different. You had to hand pick things, you had to go in after the fact, you have to edit stuff. Now it's more stuff is being baked into the product. As we consume it differently, a smart vendor will say, I see this repeated pattern, I'm going to move that into, so that maybe the end consumer isn't having to automate it, but let's monitor the pattern of consumption, change the way our product delivers that service, so a smart vendor is able to do it to avoid for this fine room of folks to have to go here and figure out how to learn Ruby today and then be told that next week Ruby's garbage and you got to learn Go, and if you don't learn Go, you're a dummy, and then in 3 months it's going to be like, wow, Go stinks, and it'll be the next thing if we continue.
Remember when we used Ruby?
What about infrastructure as code? So,
True, same thing, panacea, right? It's, I agree, last year, 6 months ago, ask anybody what cloud native was. Now there's a foundation for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are we just renaming hope for things? I'm going to just get that Obama hope thing and just put cloud native.
Well, let's level set for a second. We're at VMworld. It's not the first VMworld. This is what, 10, 12, 11? I don't know
Something
how.
like
it's
that.
More than
13,
10.
I think.
13, yeah. A lot.
13 North American.
A lot.
Yeah.
And back in, was it 2008 that Steve Herod came out with software-defined data center? Something like that?
Oh, no, that was like 12.
2012. Sorry,
yeah.
I mixed my years. So 3 years ago, Steve Herod, I should know this because I just did a blog on this, but my point is that he comes out with the software-defined data center, and that was sort of the first point that we started looking at the data center in this pool. It's an abstract pool and automate. And because you guys are saying automation, and then you're saying, but we got to still abstract some things. I think, is that sort of the problem with infrastructure, is that we're stuck in this issue where we have gaps, where we have problems in any part of that custody chain of getting to something that you can automate much more elastically than all these silos and all these, unabstracted pools. And why did they exist? I mean, I think that's the number one question is to the panel is, why do these silos still exist?
It doesn't
Do we
hurt
lack
us.
performance controls? Is it more of a politics issue internally that people feel more comfortable saying, I need a dedicated silo of hardware for this app because I feel like that's the only way I can get my SLA?
I think
What
it's
is
a
it?
little bit of everything.
Yeah, well, you need to have somebody to blame if something goes wrong.
Right, I was going to say.
Yeah. You need that
Somebody
one
needs to
throat
own it.
choke.
They
Or nobody owns
a
it.
throat to choke
Yeah.
still. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that simple. And they don't want to generalize it and say, we're going to choke IT. We
Right.
want to choke this person. It was their fault
Yeah,
that my app didn't do
and
this.
there's a lot of development going on that kind of allows folks to be able to slowly transition their traditional infrastructure over to more of a cloud-like architecture. So, there are examples where you can use that cloud-like orchestration, but it also allows you to include your traditional siloed infrastructure, so then you don't feel the pain as much. But that's something that's coming along and helping out in being able to make that transition.
The interesting thing is the reason why it's not happening at the rate that we want it to. We're industry pundits who are always looking 18 months down the road or trying to be ahead of the curve. It doesn't hurt as bad as we would make the world think that it does. Going through and deploying a physical machine isn't as bad for somebody who's only ever experienced that.
Right.
But Docker.
Winner! There you go, there you go.
Right, Senator from Texas.
Calling in with SolarWinds. Quick question for the panel. I'd love to get your thoughts on the rise of the infrastructure developer, aka DevOps.
There we go.
See, it's funny you bring that up because I was actually about to touch on that. I think right now that's another change that we're going to see. Like I give a talk at a couple of VMugs about the next gen engineer. What are we going to see as ourselves, in our infrastructures to run it? Well, we talk about automation and orchestration. Well, what does that require? It requires that you have an understanding of a development workflow. Okay, you need to understand how to get through steps. You need to think like a developer in order to manage those pieces of automation, right? Well, I think that's a big shift that we're starting to see because you're starting to see people that come in that know how to code, but they know infrastructure as well. And they combine the two, and now we've got that wonderful word DevOps that I hate, period. Okay, I can't stand that because I walk into a lot of customers that talk, we need to hire some DevOps people.
Well, come on, we all hated on cloud for a bunch of years, and it's not
still
going
hate
away.
on cloud.
I mean, we had a cloud panel last year, and this cloud, it's a real thing. It's coming. So it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast on the flight out, and the real description I've heard of DevOps that I kind of like the best is it's really about it's not a product or a single set of tools, but it answers some of those organizational, working together, understanding the workflow, and changing the way I manage things to try to create, I know you don't like the term, but infrastructure as code
There we go.
Because if my starting comment was, if I build something and that's the way it's going to stay for a bunch of years, it's, when you drive your car out of the lot, when you buy a new car, it's like not worth as much. You'd lose like, a quarter of it when you drive it off. Your infrastructure, if I roll it out there and I can't change it, it's already way out of date. Amazon likes to call it the iceberg that you put in your environment. So I'm not saying it's all going to the public cloud, but, it's, if you talk to my friends in security, the thing you need to do is update your security a lot. You need to be able to have APIs and have platforms that I can add new services and move my business forward, not have 5-year-old technology or 10-year-old technology.
And security is a big key of what you talk about. And that's also gating the pace of these changes in development is the security behind it.
I think iterative successes come, and that's why the reason why we never get to DevOps. And I love the idea of infrastructure as code, but we have this where it needs to be, and there's a long gap in between. And I think there's this weird thing, and Jay, you brought it up. How do we assess failure? How do we even assess success? Have you successfully deployed a DevOps methodology in your workplace? Maybe you have 60% of your processes, yes, I'm Canadian, so processes that are DevOps, and there's 40 that aren't. Is that a failure of embracing DevOps? Do you need to get to 100% of anything, same as infrastructure as code? Like if portions of it slowly and iteratively become, consumed a certain way, applied to policy, security's embraced everything that we do, it's just a matter of slowly growing.
Yep.
And by the time we get to 60%, all the stuff that we're doing is going to be called legacy again.
All right, so we got the back half of the panel here. There's a couple of saucy things we haven't quite gotten into yet. Since this is infrastructure, there are some things that we can get a little gritty with, like the network. So network virtualization obviously has been a hot topic. We're at VMworld. They'll be talking a lot about NSX. And yet we have Cisco that also opposes with ACI. And so the question of the panel is, which one is right and when? Or is there a universal right one or wrong one for network virtualization? Who wants to take that?
If you're looking at the Cisco guy, you're completely wrong. I do storage.
You got a networking panel coming up. Isn't this just a networking problem we're trying to solve?
Hey, if you want to talk about storage networking, I can go there, but not that's.
I have a question for y'all. Do you guys think that that they address the same issues? Do you think those two products actually address the same issues, or do you think one complements the other, or what?
Do you guys think that there's policy?
Hey,
bingo.
So to answer your question, he just did. It's all about policy. It's all about how you want to do it, basically. So it doesn't matter. You choose whatever flavor you want.
I think the I think this whole ACI versus NSX thing needs to stop because they're complementary. They're not competitive.
I agree.
Right? They're not competitive by any means.
Exactly.
You can read between the lines and say, oh, they are competitive, but in all reality, NSX is a software layer abstraction for virtualized networks where ACI is across the physical landscape.
Are you saying the Cold War between Cisco and VMware isn't helping the customers?
Well, no, he makes a good point though. It's like this whole competition between the two. It really does need to stop. That's why I posed that question to you guys, because they are complementary. They're not against each other.
Yeah.
We put them against each other, but
I work with big accounts here in the West, and topic comes up frequently is, oh, should I go ACI or NSX? And I say yes. The fact that you're thinking about SDN and NFV is a win, right, to begin with. But secondly, do both, because yes, you may be near 100% virtualized, but you still have a ton of physical stuff.
Absolutely.
Right? So why not have that abstraction layer across both planes, right?
Absolutely.
So everyone agree, show of hands, that it's a hybrid solution depending upon the scenario? Anybody have a counter to that feel like they're pretty strong on one or the other? You do?
Swag, swag.
I love it.
Uh-oh.
I love antagonists.
Somebody take a picture of his badge.
Bonus points.
Full disclosure, what's on your laptop?
You can't always blame Canada on the shirt.
I'm an equal opportunity free sticker. Put it on for my laptop.
It doesn't work for Cisco either. So
just in terms of I work for a pretty small company. Relatively speaking, it's a small data center, and I've been facing the question of NSX versus
ACI.
ACI, thank you. And,
Thanks for the help there, Patrick.
Yeah, sorry. But honestly, you say both, and that's great, and it makes sense if you're a large shop. But when you are faced with the shortage of manpower that we have right now, it's hard to just even do one of those. How do we get beyond the challenge of just doing one and having to do both? I love all the concepts and all the discussion that we're having about DevOps and infrastructure as code and automating things. But the reality from my perspective is I don't have the time or the money to do both.
Hunter, give him your card so that we can call him after. No, I'm just kidding. No,
You also have a hand
So
back.
in the back.
I think,
So why not move everything to the public cloud then?
Well, I mean, because he's in a sweet spot. Or he's in a no man's land, really. I mean, the thing is that he's too big for moving everything to public cloud, and he's too small to go into massive SDN deployments, and that's okay. The reality is that it's possible. It could be neither.
Yeah.
The reality is that
There are a lot of people who just don't have the problems that those things are designed to solve.
right, as Howard just said,
Bingo.
because I've heard it. There's just a lot of people who just don't have those problems that these two things are supposed to design to solve. So the answer could be, anywhere along the spectrum of this doesn't suit me, to both suit me, to maybe one solves the problems that I have. And that's the objection that I have to the premise of the question in the first place. Because in my ignorant stance as a poor dumb storage guy and not really knowing what the differences are between the two of my own company, mind you, I have a hard time placing it out. And he's got a question in the back, and then we'll go to you, okay?
Hi, Tim Carr. I was just wanting to comment on the NSX ACI thing. I work with a lot of customers, and when that conversation is definitely coming up, and I wholeheartedly agree that the answer should be yes. Just because you're looking at that, that's a wonderful thing, right? That said, I've heard the argument that you can do both of them on the same network, and oftentimes that's immediately shot down at the higher level. Architecturally, it makes a lot of sense, but realistically, what we're talking about here is the cost of ACI plus NSX for ports and for the server licensing and so on and so forth. So I've seen that as a non-starter in many of our customers in the Chicago area.
Well, so the question involves, yet another variable to be taken into consideration, right? And one of the questions we were talking earlier about with regards to the silos and why aren't we doing this, we didn't actually get the chance to bring it up, but budgeting is asymmetrical inside of your infrastructure. I refresh my servers way more often than I refresh my storage arrays. And that is going to happen no matter what. You're going to have a mismatch in that along the way, and cost is yet another one of those variables that affects just the personnel as well as the infrastructure to that point. And he had a question in the middle. That's a really good point.
Who's the moderator here?
Well,
wow.
he's now
He's
the
doing your
microphone
job,
junkie.
Keith.
I'll just say that it's easier for him to cut himself off.
Cut himself off.
Easier for him to cut himself off than for me to
Ouch.
cut him off.
You guys done?
Whiptail rules.
No, we're never done.
Bringing up what he said with the small infrastructure, my IT staff is me and one other person, but we have a lot of data. So the automation is a great thing, but then again, you got to bring in somebody else to get it set up. Same with the data in the networking. Where do you see it with the small businesses going?
Jay brought it up. It's a solution without a problem. Mm-hmm. Like you effectively have not hit a barrier where the pain points have struck.
Right.
And or right. There's a challenge in bridging that, and it always floats back to it's like
now is it more that management
solutions are always enterprise complicated solutions. Mm-hmm. Now we try and push them down into the SMB, and little enterprise solutions are not SMB solutions.
I love how when he gets
Can we just mic him up over here? If he shows up where he's automatically mic'd up, you can get mine.
Yeah, you're right. We tried. The problem is it doesn't fit the class, right?
Nobody on the video
So the problem is that we try and make SMBs use washed and shrunk versions of enterprise solutions, and that is not an SMB solution. The fact you have a lot of data doesn't mean you need network virtualization. it probably means you need copy management so that you're not maintaining that many copies of that data.
Well,
and that means you need an array that does good snapshots, and nobody makes one of those for 25 grand.
It boils down to just understanding what you have, right? And then understanding what technologies we have available to us that can address the issues that you have. I mean, it really just comes down to understanding your environment.
Your second.
And scaling solutions doesn't go linearly up or down. It will morph as we get to each particular scale, and absolutely right, Howard. Yeah, we constantly do this. Like, well, if it works for, a 25 node cluster, then let's put it in a 3 node cluster. Like, we may be over-architected for the 3 node.
You can't always drink the Kool-Aid. That's basically what it boils down to.
Solution from the thousands.
Yeah, every scale that we hit is going to have a different, we try to make it as lather, rinse, and repeat and linearly scalable as possible, but the reality is, especially when it comes to SMB, it's tough. It's tough to be a consumer of it.
All right,
It would be nice if our problems scaled
There you
as
go.
the solutions did.
Yeah.
The cloud problem, and I can see this as a Don't Blame Canada shirt on, everybody always tells me you're going to go to the cloud, and I've got folks that I know and I respect that as a view, but I worked for Canadian Financial Services. Done and done. Never goes to the cloud. Don't blame me, blame the federal government, blame all the weird stuff around it. It will never be an option until we change the way that we have to protect that data and...
Yeah. Oh yeah, we haven't talked about...
Yeah, governance is obviously a big issue.
So once you start adding in all these different functions, right, you have the government regulation, you have the asymmetrical budgeting, you have the skill sets of the staff, you have what actual solutions are available for your problems, you have problems that you didn't even know you had before you actually had them. All of these different things mean that you're not going to say, if I improve my DevOps personnel, I'm going to eliminate all my problems. Right. And if I improve my storage array, I'm going to solve all my problems. Or if I improve my network virtualization, I'm going to solve all my problems. No, it just means that part of the ecosystem is being moved in a different direction, which is going to have unintended consequences, both positive and negative, somewhere else.
Yep.
And sitting there and pretending that infrastructure doesn't matter is like saying Mother Nature doesn't matter because all I'm doing is walking down the street. Right? It makes a huge difference, and it's the butterfly effect of the data center. And that's one of the things that we need to, yeah, exactly. We need to make sure, at least,
That was the bird pooping on your head.
Yeah.
No, that's you, Howard.
Okay. All right, let's we got a question over here. Let's field it.
Hey, yeah, so the question is about our profession, right, as virtualization engineers, for example. So if you take a look at the history of it, like, at first it was like Windows, right, that VMware appeared, we virtualized Windows. Then kind of storage piece came, like, you need to know how to communicate, like, how to create this connection between storage and, like, ES6, for example, like, you need to know it. Then next thing, like network virtualization, you need to know something about networks. Now we're talking about DevOps. So kind of, we should know everything, right? But you cannot know everything. You will know just little like pieces of it. So the question is, do you think it is good to know like small chunks of information and do not know everything? Or it's just the way how, like, to where our profession is going? Like, are you ready, like, for example, that some doctor will do an operation on your brain, but the same doctor, like, cures the animals?
Can I address this one really quickly? Over the last year, I have noticed that an awful lot of people who are so absorbed in the particular sector that they're in, what they know, they believe that's all there is to know. And I am okay with somebody admitting that they don't know everything and they don't have everything to know. What I am not okay with is somebody saying, this is all anybody needs to know is what I know. That's where I have a problem with, and I find that to be rampant in a lot of the initiatives that are going on inside of IT right now.
Oh yeah, I think you should have a full-blown, or I shouldn't say full-blown, you should have an understanding or a foundational understanding of every piece. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, it comes down to that communication. You can't communicate with someone if you know nothing about it. Right. But if you know a little bit about it, you can communicate enough to get your point across, and then at the same time be educated from that SME. Hey, well, I know what you're talking about, but here's what it really is. So you're growing, but you're also, you still have your forte, your focus, but you know a little bit about everything.
And that's really important because as each parts of your infrastructure changes, like for example, NVM that you brought up earlier, that's going to totally change the landscape. And that's going to really, really impact our networks. And what is that going to do for our networks? Well, if you are only storage centric and not realize what kind of impact in general that you're going to have on the network, how are you going to be able to have that conversation 2 years from now?
Yep. Good point.
I mean,
Okay.
And interesting, if you look at it, there is no such thing as eliminating bottlenecks in your environment.
Right.
You only
They
move
just
them.
move around.
I mean, you know, one of the main reasons Fiber Channel got created was because the storage team was tired of going to the network team and the network people saying, I'm not going to fix that, no QoS for you, no nothing. So the storage team said, fine, we'll do it ourselves and we'll create our own network.
So save the Fiber Channel for a second.
I was waiting for that to say.
I see Jay over there rolling up them sleeves, getting ready.
Because just for the record,
We all know Fiber Channel came around because SCSI cables were too fat.
And too short.
all right. So, question.
I guess mine has to deal with hyperconverged.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Nobody wants to talk about that.
You know, they have the promise of scalability, commodity, you know, all of these buzzwords that they can pop up and say, yeah, we do this better because. But then you see things like HP dumping themselves out of the Evo Rail game. Where do you guys see hyperconverged as a platform for
How long do we have?
business?
Because I know we're
Hold on a second. Hold on a
already
second.
halfway through
Hold on a
this.
second. Let me layer that for a second and say, where does hyperconvergence work and where does it not work?
Sure. Yeah, that'll work.
Because
Yeah.
is it a universal answer? I think
It's
the
one of
answer
those things where, you know, it's infrastructure in a box. And then you can scale as your business grows. And that's okay till you get to a certain point. So it's one of those things where it is a plug and play, great to get your stuff up if you got 100 employees or something like that, and as your business grows. But your business is going to get to a point where that might not make any sense anymore. And even a lot of the solutions do have limitations on how far they can manage. So once you've gotten beyond that, and some of the solutions only allow for you to use server-side storage, which is great and fine, but if you need capacity beyond that and you need that capacity to communicate, you know, you only have a small handful of vendors to work with to be able to communicate with a larger infrastructure. So it's one of those things where, you know, it's a wonderful architecture. It's just that it does have its limits as a company grows.
It
So
has
I'm going
its
to
use
disagree.
cases, just like everything else.
So first of all, there's about 20 vendors in this space right now, and we are really early as to what's going on. So
And
the
they're all in
interesting
this
stuff
room.
isn't the box that gets me up and running in 5 minutes rather than hours or days or months.
It's still
the
interesting.
interesting thing is if I can transform the way I think about my infrastructure. So, you know, I'm not quite saying it's infrastructure as code, but, you know, EMC bought a company called Scale.io. You know, limited scalability. I mean, Calgar, who's in the room, I think, tested it to a couple thousand nodes.
Yeah.
Service provider. I've interviewed a service provider that's using it, and it's pretty interesting.
But you know, I don't think it. I don't think it changes.
Okay.
No.
So we can get
Scale.io
semantic
is
arguments over
virtual
what.
SAN.
Having
So
storage nodes and compute nodes is different than having the storage layer spread across your compute nodes like mayonnaise on a.
Yes, and that doesn't mean it's not great. It's just a different. It's just a different technology.
Okay, quick last answer, Rick.
I'd comment on the Scale.io comment that Scale.io, you can do hyperconverged with it, or you can do
It's an
storage
ingredient.
only.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Howard, if
it's
you've
an
seen the
in-
VX rack from VCE, that's a hyperconverged.
But it's an ingredient, is what he's trying to say.
CPU cycles on the hypervisor host cost 3 times as much as CPU cycles on bare metal servers because you have to buy vSphere and Windows Enterprise Edition to license your VMs. At some scale, X storage nodes, even if they're exactly the same hardware, and Y compute nodes, is less expensive and the same operationally. as hyperconvergence.
Yep.
Yeah, so Howard and I can spend a couple hours on this because, you know, what I would argue is that, you know, there's plenty of the solutions out there that are not, you have one block to choose from, you've got a wide variety, and can I add in capacity, can I add in performance, can I make that into what Steve Herod called the software-defined data center? vSAN, you're going to hear a lot about this week, Evo Rail, and they've got some announcements I'm under NDA on, but, you know, big push for VMware, big push for all the storage vendors out there.
That's to Howard's point.
So,
I mean, vSAN is an ingredient to Evo Rail. So,
I think the bigger point too that we've hit on every single question, and I'll try and sum it in one thing. The solution has to match the problem. We have to identify the problem the best, and that the first thing we're doing, whether it's infrastructure, development, whatever it is, we have to become better at identifying the actual problem to then build the solution, and no single solution.
And I don't think it necessarily
no single solution answers it all.
We got to move on because we got only a few minutes left. We do have one question, but before we get to that question, so I think the summary is that no one architecture like hyperconvergence fixes everything. So you're not going to like fix all IT problems by doing hyperconvergence, and that you have to look at what the variables are for where hyperconvergence is good for you and where it may not be good for you.
It's a tool in the shed.
What problem are you solving?
Perfect.
Thanks. Okay, question in the back.
So what you guys define as a problem is fairly well understood, and for most part, you all seem to be in consensus. I'm very interested to hear what each of you is, at your respective employer, is driving or contributing to as initiatives.
Which initiatives exactly?
To resolve automation, abstraction, programmability. So what you specifically contribute or drive to resolve the
Are you asking us what we've done for you lately?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I know. I saw the spit take from Howard.
Thank you.
I'm second in line.
I'm gonna like, I could eat a whole hour just talking about like what EMC is doing, because it.
You're not
standards, right, Rick?
So you're not making any announcements, are you?
When you look at the federation of companies, you know, obviously we have VMware focusing on abstraction of the entire data center, white software. So from a compute side, network side, on the EMC side of the house, we're abstracting storage, which in essence is to help simplify, you know, automation orchestration, to create single APIs that can be leveraged for the entire data center, regardless of what the hardware is. And that's just like the VMware side of the house. And we start talking about like the third platform, that's, you know, a whole different conversation of how we're contributing to open source endeavors like OpenStack and other, you know, open projects. If you want to talk deeper about it, you know, we can definitely go off on a sidebar. But
anybody else want to comment?
Sum it up,
we'll head on to the next one.
Yeah, so,
common API creation and
Intel's going to suck it all into the chip.
Of course, you know. So Intel is everywhere in your infrastructure. And we see the innovation going on the public cloud side. We see the innovation going on the enterprise side. We're there to foster that. We're there to optimize the whole infrastructure. So whether you're a public cloud provider or you're an enterprise, our biggest area that we're going to do is make it efficient and make it faster. And that's our job. And so we don't pick one infrastructure over the other. We're fostering it all.
Okay, so last segment here. We got 3 minutes, and then we got to wrap it up. So I get to pick this last topic, and we touched on it really just at the scratch surface was the buzzwords. And so we've got OpenStack, we got Docker, we got the whole cloud native apps. Let's wrap all that into kind of one final question for the panel, which is, where's the state of all this going with the open source community? Is it all going to be OpenStack? Is it going to be all Docker with no virtualization? Where is this going?
I've been waiting for this one.
I was going to say, we'll just let Eric talk about this.
Same thing. Is OpenStack ready? No. The question is, are you ready for OpenStack? You know, is OpenStack going to solve a problem that you have today? Is AWS the place to go? Why is AWS attractive? It gave you the ability for your developers to consume IT quickly, easily, by policy, repeatable, immutable. It solved all of those problems. Does OpenStack solve a lot of those problems? Yes. Will it solve SMB problems? Whoa, no. Will it solve, you know, even enterprise problems? All of them? No. Is it purpose-built to do a lot of cool things? Absolutely. Is open source in general going to be great? Yes. Mesos. Aha, I beat you to that one.
COS, all right.
There you go.
Now we need a data center operating system. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. Wait a minute, I've heard that before, haven't we? Yeah.
Did we leave a buzzword off the table, by the way, or did we hit all the open source?
We can definitely see that open source is driving innovation, and big incumbent companies are seeing the value in adopting and embracing that, and they're helping to drive it as well. Whether it's altruistic, it doesn't have to be, but it's a good way to move. It's not going to solve the world, but it's going to at least have us be a consensus. And that was a great thing that we heard before. It's like we have to come to consensus.
There's a lot of momentum behind it, so there's becoming a lot of support.
Are we out of our 3 minutes for the wrap? Is that?
We're going to over-provision time to make sure. I got to get Stu's opinion on this. So Stu, give us your thoughts.
All right. So to prepare for this, I actually read a book on the plane ride out. So Stephen O'Grady wrote, if you had read, he did one called The New Kingmakers, talking about developers. His new book, which only took a couple hours, is The Software Paradox. And the premise of the book, which you can read on your premises, but it's a premise, Jay, is
no problem with using the word right.
If you remember, Mark Andreessen said that software is eating the world, but the challenge is that open source is eating software. And that means that the traditional software shrink-wrapped license model is dying. And
open source is software.
Right, open source is software, but if you look at how I monetize software, it's getting harder to monetize hardware, it's getting harder to monetize software, because the developers, the guys who are doing this, they have no budget. So,
they have nothing to lose.
They have nothing to lose, and they're going to try these things. I mean, an interesting thing, we talked, a lot of these new technologies, you don't need to go all in. One of the great things about AWS was, I can go try it, and I can fail, and I can, do it pretty cheap. God, we interviewed a company that spent, they spun up 2 supercomputers, and it took them a month and $10,000 to do this, and they did all their tests. It would have taken them 3 years and $10 million to hopefully do it okay, and we know how those kind of big projects go. So, we want to be able to try a lot of different things. We want to be able to fail, and let's say buy Docker, sell OpenStack.
There you go.
So
I think you mentioned something pretty interesting, and I'll just cheat and ask one little follow-up with you, because I'd like to know, how much software or revenue reporting AWS has in their model. That's all subscription-based. Is that the answer?
So right. That's the conclusion of the book. Is there's subscription. There's building a full stack. Companies like Apple, do that. So there's a lot of ways to kind of cut that. But yeah, I mean, a big question we have is you have companies disrupting the old way of doing things, and usually doing it for pennies or dimes on the dollars. And what's the workforce going to look like as we make that shift? But those of us that are willing to play, and there's a great book called Racing with the Machine. So if you're willing to embrace the chaos a little bit, hopefully there's some good opportunities too.
Yeah, and the hardware and silicon companies are really big in fostering open source.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you got to buy hardware to run on it. So.
Yeah. So for a lot of the partners in the room, and I'm not sure who's partners here. I know Tim from the back was from Ahead and some others. That's the thing that the partners are seeing today now, is that the resale model of traditional hardware software is moving much more towards managed services and subscription-based modeling for the way people want to consume. So anyways, great lively bunch of guys here and gal that we got some expressed opinions. So I appreciate you guys chiming in with all the questions. It was a great set of questions. Let's give the panel a round of applause. My name is Keith Norbie. I work for SolidFire, and thanks for coming to the IT infrastructure panel at VMworld 2015.